I grew up in a family that truly appreciated music and truly loved music. Neither one of my parents played a musical instrument, but they both loved to listen to music, especially classical music. My dad was, and still is, a huge, huge Beethoven fan. So when I was little, he and I would march around the living room to the St. Stephen Overture and the Coriolan Overture and the Fidelio Overtures. And we used to listen to the Beethoven symphonies all the time. My mom, on the other hand, was the opera lover in the family, and she especially loved Mozart operas. So we would listen to Così fan tutte and Don Giovanni and the Magic Flute, which is actually how I got my start in voice lessons. So when I was around 8 years old, and I had already been taking violin lessons for about 5 years at that point, but we were listening to the Queen of the Night aria from the Magic Flute, and I started singing along, and apparently I hit all of the high Fs in this aria. And my parents heard this and thought to themselves, wow, that's not too shabby for an 8-year-old. So maybe Jennifer should be taking voice lessons too. And so I started studying voice. I played around a bit with composing when I was growing up, especially in my teens. But once I got to college, I dropped it because I was too busy, playing in musical ensembles and studying for my classes. I didn't have time to fit composing in. But the thing I disliked most about it was having to write out the notes with a pen and a piece of paper, because I would lose the melody so much of the time. So, I would be, say, brushing my teeth, and a melody would come to me, and I would put down the toothbrush and go run, find a piece of paper and a pen, and start, handwriting out the notes one by one. Well, the problem with that was I tend to lose my melodies very quickly, so I would get halfway through the middle of a beautiful phrase, and, just like that, it would be gone, because it had taken me too long to write down the first part of the phrase. So that was really, really frustrating for me. In the middle of 2006, a friend of mine convinced me to switch to a Mac, and I bought this cute little white MacBook. It was the first generation, fresh off the line, and it came with this program called GarageBand, which is a music recording program very similar to the one that the professionals used, but dumbed down for people that have never used this sort of software before. So I started playing around with it, and pretty soon I had gotten the hang of it, and oh my gosh, the things I could do with this software. I started writing songs again. I hadn't written a song in well over 8 years at this point, and all of a sudden I realized that I could use this to make music so quickly and so easily that I was able to take the melodies that would come to me when I was brushing my teeth and put the toothbrush down, run over to the computer, and open up GarageBand and type out the notes, or play the notes on my keyboard. And so I was actually able to take all of these fragments, these fleeting fragments, capture them, put them down, and arrange them into songs. And oh boy, was that exciting. Even though I was operatically trained, a lot of my earlier songs used a more gentle, more natural style of singing. Um, and most people think that's because I was trying to sound more contemporary, but actually it's because I didn't want to disturb my neighbors. At the time, I was living in an apartment complex, and I had been previously bothered by my neighbors for playing music too loud. So when I was recording, I tried not to sing too loud. And of course, an operatic voice is naturally a loud voice. Even when you're singing softly as an opera singer, you're still singing pretty loudly. People can hear you. So I used this softer, more natural voice so I wouldn't disturb my neighbors. And I eventually sort of developed that and grew to really like that style of singing. And I started listening to other singers that use that more natural, softer style, like Sarah McLachlan, and Enya especially, and Sade. And I used them as inspiration. And so that really inadvertently ended up influencing the style of songs that I ended up writing.
My time just would end, whose twilight falls. Love will grace my final birth. Da, da, da,
My earlier songs were very simple, a low synthesizer line, maybe some bass, string pads, a little bit of piano, some electronic sounds, just as filler, and that was basically it. Then later on, my orchestral training, playing as a violinist in orchestras growing up, it started to assert itself, and I found myself yearning for a fuller, more orchestrated sound. Um, and this came out in my first fully orchestrated song called Wind Song. And this was truly a labor of love. Emphasis on labor. Let me tell you, it was not easy at all. But I learned a lot, especially how to fit different sounds together so that they didn't clash and they actually complemented one another. It's a lot like choreography, musical choreography in a sense. So, I mean, you can imagine some of the most beautiful solo scenes, like in Giselle or in Swan Lake. And, you know, imagine two immensely talented dancers dancing those two solos together on the same stage. You know, each one of them is beautiful in and of itself, but together it would just be a disaster. So, in the same sense, you can have a beautiful oboe line and a beautiful cello line, but you have to make sure that they complement one another if you're going to write them at the exact same time in a score. So, and of course, when you have a zillion different orchestral sections, you know, you have violins, violas, cellos, basses, oboes, clarinets, trumpets, trombones, percussion, and you have to make them all play together. So there's just so much choreography going on, and it's very tough. I found myself, you know, just spending like half an hour going over like 3 or 4 notes, going, how do I make these notes fit with those notes over there? Because these are both really great ideas. And sometimes it just comes down to accepting the fact that you have to delete one of your great ideas and just stick it back in your pocket and use it later on. And that, I think, actually is the hardest lesson to learn, is when you have too much going on and to be willing to remove some of it for the sake of the overall piece.